Hello, everyone. My name is Kat Manzuris, and yes, I am the program conservation and programs coordinator, manager now at the Maryland Zoo. It's a little related to this, but this is kind of something I've pursued on my own kind of time, and I actually was a part of this when I was an animal keeper there, as well as the main person who founded this was also an animal keeper, so it's kind of an animal keeper founded project. So my time at the zoo is pretty closely tied to it, but it's mostly separated. So I'm here mostly on behalf of FC Sal is what we call it for short now. But I'm happy to answer questions about the zoo, but I'm not really here on behalf of the zoo. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that. So the Conservation for the Foundation of Salamanders is what we're called now. And also I just want to let you know I've been involved with this organization for many, many years since its founding. I am not that involved anymore, but I will probably be involved for life because I was, helpful for it for so many years and probably have my hand in it a little bit, but I might not know every single thing that's going on, like very, very currently. I've kind of taken a break from it, but I'm happy to talk about it today. So this organization was actually founded in 2015. Our founder is Lauren Augustine. At the time, she was a reptile and amphibian keeper at Smithsonian. She's actually the herpetology curator at Philadelphia Zoo now. So let's back up a little bit. So Lauren and I attended what is called amphibian school. I went on behalf of Maryland Zoo, and she went on behalf of, I guess it was at the time, she kind of bounced around zoos. So that at the time she was probably at Smithsonian. And it is an AZA course that is taught each year for amphibian keepers, so we can learn more things about keeping amphibians, breeding, husbandry, and all that stuff. And we, get to have a lot of different types of lectures there. So at that course, we learned about one of the many threats that salamanders face, which is 3.8 million trees worldwide are cut down for wooden disposable chopsticks that are mostly sent overseas. What a waste. And we were infuriated to find out that a lot of it, the Appalachian old growth forests are targeted for this type of disposable chopstick. So I remember sitting next to Lauren and she was just absolutely aghast at something like that. We'll come back to that statistic. So as you know, the Appalachian forests are, home to lots and lots of salamanders, as this beautiful map shows. As you can see, that little dot of red up there is the Appalachian forest and home to many, many salamanders. I'm going to brag a little bit too, and I actually kind of broke it down a little bit more. This is a chart that I made as a mini project when I was in grad school. And so what it does is it breaks down how many salamanders, how many salamander species are in a state in the United States, and it's broken up into tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So tier 1 is 50 plus species, and a tier 6 would be like 1 to 9 species. And this is a really fun interactive map to show to people, because then a lot of people are surprised at how many salamanders actually are found in their home state, especially when you live on the East Coast and around the Appalachian area. But when I was putting this together, I was really, really surprised at how many were in California. But that makes sense. There's a lot of wet forests out there as well. It's almost kind of like another Appalachian out there in some ways. So most of these states in the middle just have a couple of salamanders. Seems like everybody has tiger salamanders, even Arizona. So the idea that Lauren came up with after we learned about this problem with the disposable chopsticks was to help curb the problem and help salamanders basically at the same time. So she had the idea of making stainless steel reusable chopsticks to sell to people that they can bring to the sushi places or wherever you like to use chopsticks. And it would be kind of like the, bring your own bag movement that we've seen, an uptick in over the decades, and especially is spurred by the plastic bag ban, which is helpful. So she came up with a mock-up of the stainless steel chopsticks, and then had the idea of having a nice little velvet carrying case with the branding name on it, so that you can just kind of put it in your bag and take it to wherever you go use chopsticks. So like I said, it's supposed to be kind of like the bring your own bag movement. The idea was the proceeds of the chopsticks would go to salamander research and conservation endeavors. But why salamanders? Well, I'm talking to a herp club, so I don't really have to tell you why salamanders, because we probably all love salamanders here. I love salamanders, but just in case anybody doesn't know, they are one of, if not the most abundant vertebrate in many forests, especially around Appalachian areas. They're an essential species for the forest ecosystem. They, live among the leaf litter and they eat lots of insects, and they're just sort of part of that micro ecosystem of the forest floor. The Appalachian Mountains, like I had gone over before, has many, many species of salamanders, 14%, and face many threats: deforestation, disease, pollution, climate change, you name it, it's all the same. And we've noticed that there was little focus on this species of, this order of amphibians. Plus, they're cute. I have to throw them. Look at those smiling faces. So I want to break down a little bit how to animal keepers with not much resources or money were able to basically make a foundation on its own. So there's this national organization called the American Association of Zookeepers. So the American Association of Zookeepers is actually run out, its main hub is run out of Tucson, but many zoos have their own chapters. So the local one here is called the Greater Baltimore American Association of Zookeepers chapter. And the National Zoo actually has their own as well. It's called NC-AZAC, which is a little confusing, but it means National Capital AZAC. So we used AZAC, or basically Lauren and I helped her use various AZAC chapters in order to get this chopsticks idea off the ground and running. Because the American Association of Zookeepers not only is an organization that helps zookeepers get resources and learn new things about their job and does professional development, they're also interested in conservation and conservation fundraising, just because that's what lots of people are into when they're into animals, is that aspect of it as well. So the NC-AZAC, the National Capital chapter, was kind of where it was founded, and then GB-AZAC, the Greater Baltimore one, and the Bronx Zoo AZAC chapter were founding members of it. So at the time, it was called Chopsticks for Salamanders. It's a pretty easy name to remember. And then after a few years of that being very, very successful, Lauren wanted it to break off of those AZAC, that's the acronym for it, AZAC, and wanted it to be its own nonprofit. So it broke off, that's what my little lightning here is for. And then it became the Foundation for the Conservation of Salamanders. So she just kind of wanted to give it a little bit more of a professional sounding name, because she wanted the chopsticks part to just be one aspect of it and not the whole thing. So that's where it stands now. We have several different board members. There's my younger self there, posed all of our different amphibians in nature. And so we just have a little group of people. Not all of them are zookeepers. Some of them are scientists. Some are just sort of educators who are part of the board today. So since we don't always, the chopsticks aspect of it is not the whole entire project anymore. So we do have a couple of different other initiatives. We have different sale items now with our logo on it, t-shirts, pint glasses. We have a cool tank top that I've actually almost sold out of, called Keep the World Slimy, that a lot of people have liked, even people who didn't realize that they like salamanders like that shirt. Bumper stickers, and then we started an initiative called Salamander Saturday, which you may have heard of because I held one here many years ago. So Salamander Saturday is the first Saturday in May, and it's kind of since been brought online, which is a lot due to COVID, but a lot due to we kind of want lots of people participating in it. So we just sort of have every area who, like a nature center, they can participate in a Salamander Saturday all they want, and they just sort of list it online and then local people come to that nature center and participate in the activities there. The biggest thing that we do is obviously grants. So all of the proceeds to all of these items and things go to grant funding, which I'll talk about a little bit more. But however, since forming FCSAL, since it sort of broke off from the Zookeeper Association, overall we want it to be a beacon for sought after salamander information, conservation, and educational initiatives, as well as provide funding for these endeavors when it may be scarce. Which that statement sort of hits even harder after the pandemic. So I can talk a lot about the fundraising and the grants because my major role in FCSAL over the years was the treasurer. So I just sort of tracked the spending and things like that. And every year I had to write up a financial report, and I was happy to report every year, like a big part of the pie chart all went to grant spending. This presentation is just a little bit old. These numbers are probably they're even more now, and we were able to do grants throughout the pandemic, except for I think like that first year when the pandemic, and we just kind of put things on pause, which is I'm sure everybody's heard many times before. But this presentation was made in 2019, and these were our numbers then, and there's more. So here's a chart of our grant spending, or basically our expenditures. And like I said, a majority, we all do this on our own time. No one really gets paid to do this. Most of our spending is on grants, but we also, have to keep the organization going with various expenses. So main staple is the annual grant. The minimum amount that we give out every year is $5,000. We usually award more money than that because we just have so many really good proposals coming through. And some of them, they're salamanders, guys. They only take, for a project, sometimes it only takes $500 to make a little, like a little display at your zoo, or you just need that little bit of extra material expenses to make a really good exhibit or a really good head starting program or something. It doesn't usually take a ton of money to do a lot of good for salamanders. Smaller awards do get distributed out, I guess. So here are some examples of things that we have sent grants to. eDNA monitoring for hellbenders, climate change adaptations for high elevation terrestrial salamanders, population and conservation assessment of Taylor salamanders, Texas cave and spring salamander assessments. That one was really cool. Pigeon Mountain salamanders, basically assessment. They had an educational display that went with there, so that of course, put them up on the pile of grants. Effects of insecticide on salamanders, and lots of bee-sal proposals coming through in the recent years, like lots and lots. This is mostly testing, monitoring, drug trials to see how can they be cured, basically things like that. And the list right here is, as you can see, it's mostly in the United States. Recently, in the past 5 years, lots and lots of international applications. I can talk a little bit more about that when we actually go to the website. So we have done a fair amount of grant spending on educational endeavors. We established an educational eco trail in China. That was really cool too. It was like this trail in giant salamander territory, this like hiking trail basically that people go to. Apparently a lot of people in China actually don't know about the giant salamander there. So along the trail, they installed signs to just inform people who are going on hikes about this type of salamander in their area. So we funded that in 2016, and that was a really neat thing to do. We did a vernal pool coloring book funding that is still distributed now. And, like I said, this whole entire organization was brought on by zookeepers. I used to be an animal keeper, so whenever we get any of these like captive release stuff, or just zookeepers trying to do their part and doing a little bit of field work. It's very, very near and dear to our hearts. So we do tend to fund that stuff, and that's usually the stuff that they don't really ask for a whole lot of money. So I think it was our first year we did a hellbender captive release out in I think it was Indiana. We funded that. Habitat monitoring in a urban area, striped newt breeding. We've funded that a couple of times, and hellbender breeding facility. And we are continuing to grow. Salamander Saturday is starting to get bigger and bigger. I think more and more people are talking about it. Is anybody familiar with Peppermint Narwhal? They're the graphics design company, so they promote us now. Northeast Partners and Reptiles and Amphibian Conservation usually have a hand in promoting Salamander Saturday and a couple of other different organizations. So usually around that time of year, we'll kind of huddle with other amphibian type, conservation organizations and say, okay, it's time to promote salamanders because they really are kind of a forgotten amphibian. They're not as seen as other amphibians. They're not as like loud and boisterous and calling. So sort of this whole endeavor was just sort of to bring a lot more attention to salamanders, because we really do kind of feel like, I know they're Sicilians, but they're kind of the forgotten amphibian, especially when it comes to funding. So we can brag now that FC Sal is still the #1 like major funder of salamander only, like exclusive grants that at least I know of. It's usually amphibian, like it's open to just all amphibians, but we're like the one salamander. I know that there is also a hellbender group that also does grants as well, but we can brag that we are kind of bringing salamanders back to the forefront. Like they should deserve to be up there with frogs as well. So you can find us at fcsal.org. We're also on Facebook. It's been a lot more active lately. We do have a Twitter account, and then you can always email us. And even we really do want to spread the word about the grant. We really want to be kind of like the go-to place for salamander grants. And with that, I can take some questions, but what I will actually do is go to the website because we have a little bit more up-to-date information on some of the grants. But does anybody have anything for the time being?
I have a grant related question.
Yeah.
How widely is it advertised? I do like grant reviews for like Mohammed bin Zayed and some of the other ones for amphibian specific ones, and up until seeing this posting, I hadn't seen it. And I know you guys are affiliated as partners with Amphibian Survival Alliance. And like there's great opportunities to promote it internationally.
Yeah. So
Kat, do you mind repeating the question so that they can hear it on Zoom?
no problem. The question was how like kind of far and wide are we advertising the grant? So we admit that we've had a bit of a lull since the pandemic. There was not a whole lot of participation in some aspects of the organization, but we're kind of getting things back up and moving. The main place that we advertise is, I guess you could see it as like the epicenter of where we start is like the zoo world. So the zoo community all throughout the United States has their own channels. They have listservs, obviously word of mouth, they have conferences. It kind of has always started there. And we've had one person on our board who is not affiliated with zoos at all and is an actual PhD university salamander researcher. And they try their best to get it out in the circles that they know. But I would say if you are in the zoo world, and you work with salamanders, you probably know about it. And getting it, breaking out of that mold and get it out to other areas, just because we like personally don't work in those spaces, so we don't know all the channels, has been a challenge. But I would say it's getting bigger and bigger as we get further away from the pandemic and kind of grow a little bit more.
Okay. Let's
So,
chat afterwards.
yeah, I would definitely love to learn more places. But
Comment on Zoom just came in. What about getting it to national wildlife refuges?
just the refuges, like the whole entire organization, or like, yeah, I
I'm
guess
just reading what it
certainly,
says.
yeah, I can certainly look into that. The word is getting, I will say this, the word is getting out a lot more internationally, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'm gonna go to our grants page and we can look a little bit more at some of the funding that we have done. Oh, look, I've got another new number for you all. 66,454. So actually, I just want to like brag for a second. The presentation that I just gave I put together in 2019. I haven't really had a reason to update it just yet, except for when I was invited here, which I'm happy to do. But the reason why I put it together in 2019 is actually invited to a salamander festival in Panama. Like, it was really, really awesome. So it was in the Boquete area of Panama. And there's a guy out there, he's like one of the top naturalists. He does tours and stuff like that. He wanted to bring a lot of awareness to salamanders in his area. So he put together like this little festival in the town square of Boquete. And there were speakers. They invited me to come speak. There was photography hanging up everywhere, showing the different types of salamanders in the area. And the presentations could have been in English or Spanish, because I was like, I'll come, but I don't think I get a presentation in Spanish. And he was like, don't worry about it. It's a bilingual part of the, I mean, definitely, it's kind of a tourist area. So I gave that presentation there, and that was like one of the more rewarding experiences. Obviously, it's like one of the things you really wish for when you get into an organization like this, like, oh, maybe one day I'll get to do something really big. And so there was that. So they were very, very appreciative that I came out. They said having an organization come from the US gave it gave it a boost, gave it a little bit more
Prestige.
yeah, a little bit. I mean, not really, yeah. I think that's basically what he said, but I don't want to like doing a little bit of humble brag, I guess. Like having somebody come from another country, obviously very nice. Anyways, with that being said, I will say that the international applicants that we've gotten has definitely increased over time. I will also comment that we seem to be, and when we vote on the grant and we vote independently and we recuse ourselves if we know the people, some people do. The consensus lately, as there is a lot of really, really good projects happening in Central and South America, and we have been leaning more towards rewarding them, with the exception of this Spain one. In 2020, this is one of the, during the pandemic, we were able to do this, monitoring the incidence of emerging pathogens and endemic urodales in the Cantabrian region. Yeah, and these people were just absolutely amazing. So one of the fun parts about running, an organization like this is you get to send the grant money out, but you also have to bother people about updates. You got to tell our donors, like, what did this money go to? How are you spending it? And, please send us pictures. And we never had to bother these people. They sent us the most wonderful photos, and you can always look at them on our, I could probably bring some up. They're also on our Facebook page, which we a few years ago. Let's see if I have any up here. But there is a lot of disease monitoring when it comes to international organizations, because as you know, BSAL is a huge thing in Europe and haven't quite hit the United States. Correct? Anybody heard anything? No. Because I feel like the zoo would probably be on lockdown.
Can you talk a little bit about B-cell? It's maybe not right now, but at some point, because I'm not sure we're as familiar with it as we
Yeah,
should be.
so I can talk about it right now. So BSAL, for those of you who have heard me say it a couple of times, is a salamander specific fungus that is a huge problem in Europe and Asia. And it is kind of the same as the chytrid fungus, which, as you know, affects lots and lots of amphibians in the area. A lot of amphibians in Central and South America went extinct when it hit that region. And we have a lot of frogs in this area that are carriers of it, and they don't seem to be bothered by it. And so it's still this huge puzzle that conservationists are trying to work on, including myself, because I work with Panamanian Golden Frogs to try and combat. So this fungus, it'll go on the skin of the amphibian, and they usually don't survive it because they usually can't respirate. So a lot of international researchers are trying to stay on the forefront of it and learned a lot of lessons when amphibian chytrid hit other areas. And so they're basically trying to deter it from hitting. So there was some laws put into place about importation of different types of amphibians over the years. And I know there's been a lot of pushback with it. There's been a lot of people who were for it. There was like a whole lot of talk about not sending amphibians over state lines because of it. And I think it hit like the pet industry was like, whoa, guys, let's slow down. So it's still a problem. It's still being monitored. And I know some areas are also even looking into like, what do you do when you do find one that has been affected with B-Sal, like how you treat it with an antifungal and stuff like that. So big puzzle, just like it is with frogs. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So yeah, so these are just some of the grants that we have done over the years. There was some, when we first formed, it was this problem with the chopsticks, the wood being cut down in the Appalachian forest. So there was some talk of like, we need to prioritize Appalachian forest salamander projects because that's what we're for. But then once we expanded, we kind of broke free from just that one initiative and endeavor. And so we were able to expand a little bit more. And we did a lot, as you can see, we did do a lot of Appalachian forests in just eastern and southeastern United States projects. But as you can see, like with the B-Sal spread in other areas of the world, and other countries just don't have the resources that we do to sometimes do basic surveys or know basic things about their salamanders and then their area. We have sort of leaned more toward that as of late, but that's just, there's a lot of different things that go into when you're looking at grants. Sometimes it has to do with like, do they have an educational component to it, which is also part of it as well. But yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
So as you know, politics are usually very difficult to navigate. And many states have their own state reptile.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of states that don't have a state salamander.
Yeah.
Some do, some don't. Maryland has applied for the long-tailed salamander that got shot down.
Ah.
Yeah. So.
What? Yeah, I haven't heard about this. That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. So what my point is, your organization could give some credibility, and once something becomes a state reptile or state salamander, then it gets some protection and it gets awareness, and it could be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So if
Do a letter
if we submit it again, you think possibly you could help put in a word, say.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
Did you want me to repeat for those on Zoom? or-
Sure, yeah, you
So
got
the
Cliff's Notes
question
version.
is about states these days setting up a state. We usually have a state amphibian, right? And then there's like a state salamander. Some are proposing a state salamander, right?
A state reptile,
A state reptile and
and then some have state salamanders.
state salamander. So Maryland
We
is,
don't have a
Yeah.
state salamander.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, Maryland does not have a state salamander. So the question was whether or not FC Sal would put our name behind a new proposal for, I would think yes. I would have to definitely go back to the board about it, but this is exactly the type of thing that we're set up for. And this is why we didn't want to just do chopsticks and say, okay, the money's just going to some grant somewhere. We wanted to do more advocacy for salamanders. We want to be a hub for salamander conservation, a hub for salamander information, so that would probably align with us, but like I said, I'd have to like, make sure the rest of the board's okay with it.
Thank
So, yeah. Good to know, though, very interesting, yeah, go ahead.
Does your organization have any guidance or indicate what research or activity you will not fund based on the sensitivity of salamander population, or the fact that certain testing is done may go ahead and sacrifice animals or take animals and destroy the habitat in order to look for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was whether or not we have guidelines or limitations in our grant funding when it comes to salamander sensitivities and salamander care, correct? Like doing terminal, study, things like that, correct?
Right.
So each grant that comes through is automatically rejected if they don't have an IAPUC letter with that. So that is the what is the acronym? Trina, you probably know. It's basically like an internal letter that approves any kind of animal handling in research. And so if any place is going to, usually the people who work with mice know it, yeah. So if any place is going to touch a vertebrate at all, the standards are, like touch it. The standard is that there has to be a internal review of the reasoning for it. Even if it's just touching the animal one time and it's just like, boom, done. Many organizations have an IAPUC. It's like the Animal Care and Use Committee.
That's it.
Like that, yeah.
That's it.
So they all have that. We have never funded anything that would be terminal, like putting animals in formalin and just, looking at them later. It's always swab and you put them back, or swab, you do the measurements and you put them back, which I know is not 100% not harmful. I know that any handling of salamanders can potentially be harmful. We also base it on the recommendation, like they have to have a letter of recommendation from their university or whoever is conducting the study. And then we also have at least one scientist, if not two, on sort of like call on staff to be like, all right, here's the 3 that we think we're going to use. Can you please read these and tell us, because like I said, we were zookeepers, so we're not PhD people. So we get a couple of PhD people and are like, is this scientifically sound? Is this worth it? And they'll give us a yay or nay. So we have a couple of mechanisms in place to make sure that the research that we're doing definitely is worth it and is not more harmful than it is good. Yep. Yes.
Could you talk about trends in salamander conservation over the past decade or something? Like, are they more endangered now than before, or like, what are if you had to give a report card for salamander threat level, what do you think we're at now?
That's a really good question, and we have our hand in so many different areas of the world now, so it's like really hard to say if they're really hard to survey and find. I would say because they're so little known, I would say it really depends on the species too, because there's so many aquatic ones, and the aquatic areas of course are in so much more trouble than you have like a really big forest area and you have like 50 species of salamander versus like an area on the coast that's being drained constantly and built over where like tiger salamanders are. It's kind of hard to say. I would say overall, they're still in a lot of trouble, but I would just say like more data needed in order to say for sure. Yeah, I could only really speculate. Yeah, since I kind of look at it because I did so much grant reviewing and working on the money on this project. It was just such a micro focus. It's like hard for me to say.
Well, one thing you could possibly say is, what do they eat? They eat a lot of insects. Shredders, you call them shredders, whatever, things that eat trees and leaves, anything green. Well, worldwide, insects are taking a big dive. So,
Yeah.
so if their food source is taking a dive, it would make sense that the animals eat them.
Did you want me to repeat that?
If you don't mind.
Yeah. So another answer to that question is like to also look at the things that they eat, and we know for sure. Through various reports that were highly publicized, like that
Yeah.
report about the insects.
Yeah.
That had like CNN and other places that
Yeah,
are
yeah.
like not very science like friendly. And if the insects are plummeting, then the salamanders must be plummeting because they all eat insects basically, like all the land ones definitely. So. Yeah, it's lots of different areas to look at, habitat, the bee sow threat.
Rarity.
Or, yeah, exactly, so. It's complicated. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you for having me,
Thanks.
thanks for coming out,
Good work.
thank you.
Plug the job fair.
Prop sticks for sale, they are $10 each, we also, we take, I could give you like the PayPal if you want cash on or anything. And like I said, you saw that pie chart and you saw how much of that goes directly to grants.
Thank you for your hard work.
Thanks, Ken. That was
Thank you,
awesome.
thank you.
Thank
I have one question. Are
Yeah.
you at the box turtle workshop this year?
I put in to go for that and they were like, you should go to Knee Park instead. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go to Knee Park instead. I really wanted to go to that though. That was really fun last year.
I went this year. Did they have one last year?
Or the last time.